I saw the suitcase before I smelled the dust. It sat to the left of the water heater, toes of the little wheels pointed toward the door that goes into my kitchen. The morning light from the side window came in at an angle and turned all the floating dust into a slow snow, each bit bright for a second, then gone. I don't keep a suitcase in the garage. Mine live in the hall closet, nested like bowls. I stood in the cool, rubber-smelling quiet and listened to the house settle behind me. Nothing else moved, only the faint tick of the heater and a fly tapping once against the glass. The suitcase was a hard-shell carry-on, scuffed at the corners, graphite gray. The telescoping handle was down, a paper tag looped under the top grip. I looked at it without touching it. A baggage tag is the paper loop airlines use to track a bag. This one had the little square of perforations still attached. The barcode lines were crisp. The airline code letters ran along the bottom, ATC 4978, ORD. Under it, printed neat as a label on a spice jar, M. CORTEZ. The name clicked against a sound in my head. A whisper. I'd been hearing it at night, not a ghost story whisper. A human whisper, thin and careful, coming through the garage door like steam. It had been 3 nights in a row now, just after midnight, when the street goes quiet. A man's voice once, a woman's twice. I would stand by the kitchen sink and hear the same 5 words as if they were printed on a small strip of paper in the air. Leave it by the heater. The S kept getting lost. Heater came through clean. I lifted my phone and took a picture before anything else. I wanted the date and time burned into the corner. The camera app puts a little overlay there if you turn the setting on. I framed the suitcase with the water heater beside it, the dent in the drywall behind it, the coil of orange extension cord that always falls off its hook. 1 photo, then a close-up of the baggage tag, so the name and the airline code were sharp. The flash caught the lamination and made a thin rectangle of glare. I tilted my wrist and took another without the shine. The name was clear, Monsieur CORTEZ. I don't know a CORTEZ. I didn't touch the bag. I backed out, closed the door, and slid the deadbolt. I stood with my palm flat on the painted wood and took 1 breath, in and out. Then I did the simple, boring things that keep a person sane. I made tea. I turned the burner off when it sang. I wrote 3 words on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. Photo, tag, call. The call came first to mind, and the kind that didn't make a fuss. I sat at the little table by the window and searched for the airline's general number. I put the phone on speaker and kept my voice even when the person answered. I gave the agent the letters on the tag, the flight number, and the last name. 1 sentence covers it. A baggage claim check lets them see if a bag with that tag moved through a certain airport. She asked me to hold. Keys clicked. She said a quiet, She told me ATC 4978 landed at O'Hare 2 days ago, and a bag with the same last name was retagged at the counter for a local transfer. She couldn't give me more than that without the claim number, which wasn't on the paper loop I could see. I thanked her. I wrote down ATC 4978, ORD, retag, and the time and the agent's first name, Leah. That night, at 12:08 a.m., the whisper came back. I knew the time because my stove clock glowed in green numbers and because I was ready. I had set my phone by the sink, camera open, audio note ready with the big red circle. The whisper slid under the door again. Leave it by the heater. The voice was a woman's this time, low and careful. A second voice, a man's, lapped in a second later. No talking. Just go. I didn't turn the light on. I stood still. I pressed the audio record button and got 6 seconds of the words and the little scrape of a shoe. When the front of the house settled and no car doors opened within a minute, I stopped recording and saved it. I typed a line under the file name so I wouldn't have to think later. Audio whisper, 12:08 a.m. Leave it by the heater. The next morning, I walked out front as if I were just watering the little basil pot on the steps. My neighbor, Mrs. Patel, was out on her driveway setting a bag of potting soil down by her hydrangea. We talk over the fence sometimes, the easy way you do when you've seen each other in slippers. Good morning, I said. The sky was clean. A bus hissed at the corner and kept going. Good morning, she said. And she looked at the basil in my hand and said, Yours lives, like it was a little miracle. I let the water run and kept my tone soft. Have you had any deliveries mix up? Anything left in your garage by mistake? I kept it wide. She shook her head and told me about a package last month that the college kid on the other side grabbed by accident and brought back with an apology. I nodded and said, "Weird thing, a suitcase appeared in mine." She laughed a little, more surprise than humor. "Maybe a friend used your code?" she said, and then her eyes flicked to my keypad by the side door, and her mouth straightened. "We all forget to change those," she said, like she'd scolded herself with the same line. I did the boring, calm thing again. I checked my camera. A garage camera snapshot can keep you honest. I opened the little app and scrolled. The feed shows stills when it senses motion. The date stamps stack like thin cards. Yesterday at 10:14 a.m., the driveway camera caught a rideshare pulling up. My screen showed the rounded hood and the little glowing emblem in the windshield. A woman got out on the far side, so the camera caught only half of her, a gray sleeve and a soft fall of dark hair that had slipped out of a clip. She held a small suitcase, the same shape. She walked out of frame. 30 seconds later, the garage camera recorded a sliver of the door opening and then closing again. The phone says the time, 10:15 a.m. I took screenshots of both frames and saved them to the same album as the baggage tag. I circled the time in a simple markup tool with a thin pen line. I printed them on my little home printer that still smells like warm dust when it runs. The paper slid out with a soft burr and curled a little at the edges. I wrote driveway 10:14 a.m. and garage 10:15 a.m. under the photos, so the images would make sense if I had to look at them weeks from. Now I checked my porch notifications too. Those are simple. The delivery app I use sends a ping when something drops on my stoop. Nothing yesterday, no boxes. Just a ping from the grocery on Tuesday, milk and eggs, and a loaf of sourdough. The name on the baggage tag bothered me because it wasn't a stranger's name by the way it sounded. It scratched at something small and recent. I went to my text threads and typed CORTEZ into the search line. A week-old group chat for the neighborhood popped up. A woman named Maribel had posted about a lost key fob. "Hi, folks. Lost a black fob near Maple and 14th. If anyone finds it, I'm 2 blocks down in the coach house behind 312. Thank you. Maribel." Her last name didn't show there. We don't always put them in neighborhood texts, but the first name hit like the whisper. I had heard a Mar at least one of the nights. I scrolled up. Someone had replied with a photo of a black oval fob. "Found this near the bus stop, DM." The icon on the reply showed a smile and 2 hands. Later, a "thanks everyone found" from Maribel. No last name there either. I opened my little paper address book, the one with dog-eared pages I keep in the junk drawer. I had written 312 Coach House, landlord Evan Cole there last month when I watched his mail one weekend while he was at a wedding. He is 30-ish, a friend of my son from years ago. Quiet, pays on time, rents the back unit to a woman who moved in this spring. I hadn't met her, only waved once from the sidewalk. I wrote Tenant M because he had said Maribel and I didn't catch the last name over the wind. I didn't want to guess. I sent a text to Evan. "Morning, quick question. Did your tenant misplace a small gray suitcase? One showed up in my garage yesterday. Found a tag with M. CORTEZ." I attached the photo of the tag with the name partially framed, not the whole street view of my garage. He read it within 2 minutes. The little typing bubble blinked, stopped, blinked again. Then, "Morning, huh, I'll check with her. She's at work, I think." "That's odd. How would it get in your garage?" He added the shrug emoji. I wrote back, "That's my question too." My thumb hovered. I typed, "I have camera stills if needed," and sent it. While I waited, I looked at my credit card app. I don't go hunting for proof, but sometimes it finds you when you're doing the next right thing. I saw a gas receipt from the station near the airport, time-stamped 9:32 a.m. yesterday. I had filled up on Monday. Not mine. The card was my son's auxiliary. We share the card for travel points, a simple arrangement. He keeps the secondary card in his glove box. He had borrowed my car that morning to take his friend Manny to a job interview 2 towns over. He texted me a thank you at 1:15 p.m. It hadn't crossed my mind that the car went near the airport. I took a screenshot of the $18.04 gas receipt with the station address. I texted my son. "You took my car near the airport yesterday?" He answered 3 dots and then, "I hopped off the highway to avoid traffic." "Why?" I wrote. "A bag appeared in my garage. Just sorting out how," he said. "Weird. Want me to come by?" I wrote, "Not yet. We'll let you know." Evan wrote back, "She says she didn't lose a bag. She's at a clinic this morning, can call after." She said her last name is Cortez with an accent, not Cortez, but I know tags drop accents. Then he wrote, "She asked if the bag is locked." I didn't answer that. I took a breath and typed a clear, gentle line. "Let's keep this simple. There's a bag. It isn't mine. I can return it to airline lost and found if it's mistagged. Or the owner can pick it up, but everything goes in writing." He sent, "Understood." At lunch, I printed a small map from my computer. The simplest version with my street and the road to the airport, the off-ramp, and the gas station. I drew a thin pen line to show the route my car might have taken if someone left the interstate. It was a little teacher-ish, but it helped my brain. I tucked the map under the photo prints with a paperclip. At 1:40 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. I let it roll to voicemail. A minute later, a text came in. "Hi, this is Maribel. I rent Evan's rear unit." "He said you found a suitcase?" I typed, "Yes, it has a tag with M's Cortez. Is that you?" She wrote, "It could be. Sometimes they print wrong or I type fast. Mine has an accent. I did travel. It shouldn't be in your garage, though." I sent a photo of the tag zoomed in and waited. A long minute. "That's my first initial, yes," she wrote. Then, "I didn't put it there." A second bubble. "I'm sorry for the trouble." A third. "Can I call?" I said yes. Her voice was soft and airy, like she was outside. She said she had flown in 2 days ago. She said her brother had picked her up. She said she had stayed at his place one night because she had an early appointment yesterday at a clinic near downtown, and it was closer. She said she was embarrassed. She had some personal things in the bag. She kept saying and I guess. I let her talk. I repeated back what mattered, slow and simple, so we had a line we could both see. "So you flew ATC 4978. Your bag was re-tagged at O'Hare, you stayed at your brother's, and you did not put a bag in my garage." "Yes," she said. "Okay," I said. "Then someone else did." Silence. Then she said a small thing that changed the color of the air around me. "I left a voice memo for my brother Sunday night," she said. "I told him if he wanted the box, to leave it by the heater in his garage. He has a water heater by his back door. I've said that sentence 100 times over the years." Her breath hitched. "He lives in a building that looks like yours from the alley." A detail can be wrong and still be true. Lots of our garages look alike from the back lane. But my fence gate is a little crooked, and my keypad is old and gray and not the kind they sell now. Also, my son had my car near the airport, and someone dropped a suitcase in my space. I kept my voice even. "What box?" I asked. There was a long, small pause. "It's a shoebox with photos and papers. Not money. Not drugs. Please. It's not that." She said the last words fast, like she knew I would be thinking it. "Why would a shoebox go with a suitcase?" I asked. "It wouldn't," she said, "unless someone mixed things up." I waited. She added, very low, "My brother is not careful. He has a friend who drives for a rideshare sometimes. He's generous and he gets in over his head." Another breath. "He asked me to keep some things for him while he figures stuff out." He said a suitcase. I said I have my own travel stuff, and I don't want anyone using my address. I told him if he needed to drop a box at his own place, he could leave it by his heater and I would pick it up the next day. I shouldn't have said any of that in a voice memo. Her voice went down to a whisper on the last line. I wrote 2 words, voice memo. I didn't solve anything then. I did the next plain step. "I have a simple rule," I said. "Anything that shows up here moves only with the truth in writing. I'll need a note from you that says the bag is yours and that you consent to me opening it, or that you want me to hand it to the airline lost and found and you will pick it up there. If it is not yours, we call the non-emergency line and I let an officer open it so no one has to guess. No drama, just paper." She said okay, the way people say okay when there is nothing else to say. "I can be home by 3, she said. "I'll bring ID and write a note." At 2:20 p.m., I got a rideshare receipt in my email that wasn't mine. It was for a trip that ended on my block at 10:12 a.m. yesterday. Manny must have used my account by mistake on my son's phone. He had needed a quick hop from the train station, and my son had ordered it. I took a screenshot. A partial map in the email showed a blue line ending at my address. I moved the email to the same folder as the airline call summary and the camera stills. I keep a simple system. 1 folder, Names, times. Boring is safe. At 2:50 p.m., my son knocked and let himself in because he still knows the old code. I had texted him earlier and told him not to come, but sons sometimes help by showing up. He held up both hands at his shoulders. "I won't touch anything," he said. He looked tired. "Mom, don't be mad. That's a line that works on me the same way every time." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm paying attention." He told me Manny had asked him for a favor. The kind you do in a pinch, a quick airport swing, a drop to a friend's place behind 312. "Behind Evans?" I asked. He winced. "Yeah." Manny said, "Garage by the heater." "They know." He looked at the floor. "I should have told you. I thought it was their place." "Did you open my garage?" I asked. He wet his lips. I tapped the code. "I didn't think. I am so sorry." He rubbed his temple with 2 fingers. "I thought it was Evan's code." "They used to be the same. I know you changed yours last year." I had, after a plumber came and the keypad stuck on a number. I had told my son the new one then. He had forgotten and remembered the old one first. Sometimes codes blur in your hands when you're trying to be quick and helpful. I stayed quiet for a beat so the shape of the mistake could sit between us. "No more access for anyone without a fresh code," I said. "That's the rule going forward." He nodded. "I'll pay for whatever, if there's anything," he said. "It's not about money," I said. "It's about quiet and truth." He blew out a breath and nodded again. At 3 sharp, a woman knocked. She stood on my porch with a slim blue folder held against her chest like a book. Late 20s. Dark hair in a low twist that had loosened in the heat. Plain blouse. No makeup except a little chapstick. She was pretty in the way a person is when they look like they've been crying, and then stopped. "I'm Maribel," she said, and her voice from the phone came back with a body and a face. Her eyes went to my son and then back to me. "I have a note," she said. She handed me a piece of paper she had written at the top of a lined page. The letters were careful. It read, "I, Maribel CORTEZ, give consent for David to open the gray hardshell suitcase with tag ATC 4978, Ord, Monsieur CORTEZ, that was placed in her garage without her permission. If it is not mine, I consent to her turning it over to airline lost and found or police. If it is mine, I will sign for it." She had added her phone number under it. It was enough. A handoff note is just a line we both signed to show who took what. I added a line under hers, opened in the presence of David, Jack, and Maribel CORTEZ. We all wrote our names. We set the suitcase on my kitchen table like it was a sleeping thing that might stir if we rattled it. My son stood back by the refrigerator with his arms folded. I rested my hand on the zipper tab, not touching it, just placing my palm near it like you settle a horse. "Before we open it," I said to Maribel, "I want to be clear. If there is anything that belongs to someone else and should be returned, we return it. If there are personal, medical, or work papers, we keep them private. If there's anything that belongs to me or came into my house without permission, we talk about that, calm and simple. No one is in trouble here. We are just going to be adults," she nodded. Her hands shook a little. "I didn't put it here," she said again, quiet. "I know," I said. I unzipped the top. The teeth parted with a clean sound. Inside sat a layer of folded clothes that smelled faintly of clean cotton and airplane air. A t-shirt, a pair of jeans, a soft sweater. Under that, a clear plastic folder with a clinic appointment slip, the kind printed with time and date and the name of a nurse practitioner, and a second paper that looked like a job interview checklist from a hotel. Time slots, bring resume, HR office, 3rd floor. The name on those papers matched hers with the accent, CORTEZ. Under the papers was a small flat box for sandals, light and empty. In the corner, an envelope held a gas station receipt from 3 days ago with a city name that matched the suburb by her brother's place, 1207, and a dotted line for a loyalty stamp. There were 2 children's books, slim paperbacks in Spanish and English, new with price stickers still on. A little clear zip bag held travel-size toothpaste and a small comb. No stash, no secrets that would blow a life up. Only the small proof of a person trying to do 3 things at once. Go to a clinic, interview for a job, bring a gift to her niece or nephew. Maribel let out a sound that was like a sob and a laugh together. Relief is messy that way. She put both hands on the counter and let her head hang for a second, then lifted it and wiped one eye with her wrist. "Thank you," she said. "I thought—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I picked up the clinic slip. I didn't read the details. I slid it back under the plastic. I lifted the 2 children's books and read the titles out loud so the air could hear the plain truth of what was in front of us. I set everything back inside the way I'd found it. Sometimes you don't need to search every pocket to find the point. My son said, very soft, "I'm sorry." And he meant it. He looked at Maribel. "I didn't know," he said. "I thought I was doing a favor." "It's my fault for not asking more questions." She nodded. "It's not all your fault," she said. "I told my brother to leave a box by the heater. I just didn't think there are a lot of heaters." She tried a smile and it landed crooked, then evened out. We printed a simple handoff receipt for the suitcase. I typed it on my computer and kept the words plain. On date at time, gray hard-shell suitcase, tag ATC 4978, ORD, Monsieur CORTEZ, opened with consent. Contents observed: clothing, clinic slip, job interview sheet, 2 children's books, toiletries, gas receipt. No prohibited items. Suitcase returned to owner, Maribel CORTEZ, who signed below. I left a line for signatures. We both signed. My son signed as a witness. The printer hummed and spit 2 copies. She folded hers and slid it into her blue folder. I put mine in the little kitchen file I keep for things that would confuse me if I had to remember them without paper. I labeled the folder tab Garage Suitcase. Before she left, I asked one more thing. Not as a threat, just as a woman standing in her own kitchen who keeps her house steady. "I would like to know," I said, "if any person you are close to has access to my keypad code, or thinks they do, or might have tried a code that worked by accident." She swallowed. "My brother sometimes still uses old codes at old places," she said. "He has a good heart and a bad habit of borrowing whatever feels open. I will tell him he can't. I will tell him there are cameras and notes." I nodded. "Notes help," I said. "Cameras too. But what helps most is a clean line. You tell him no one uses any part of my house for anything. If he needs a place for a box, he calls his landlord and asks. He can leave his things by his heater at his own place." She muttered. Yes, like she was saying it to herself as much as to me. After she left, I did the 2 small chores that restore quiet. I changed the garage keypad code and wrote the new one on a sticky note with the words, "For my hands only." Then I wrote a 1-line email summary and sent it to myself. To Evan and to my son? Same words to all. Suitcase with tag ATC 4978, ORD, Monsieur CORTEZ found in my garage 10:15 a.m. yesterday. Opened with owner consent 3:05 p.m. today. Returned with signed note. From now on, no one uses my code, and anything left on my property moves only with written truth. I attached photos of the suitcase, the tag, the camera stills, the simple handoff note with signatures. Receipts over rants. They make people breathe. At 5:40 p.m., a text came in from a number I didn't know. "This is Luis," it read. "I am Maribel's brother. I'm sorry. I told my friend to leave a box at my place. He is not careful. I told him a code I thought was my friend's garage by 3:12. He got the wrong one. I will cover any cost, and I will not do this again." I wrote back, "Thank you for the apology. No more codes. Use your own address and your own locks. That's the whole rule." He wrote, "Understood." A minute later, a second text came from Evan. "I changed my keypad code too. Thanks for the heads up," I smiled. "Small dominoes fall the right way when you set them in a line." I put the folded papers in the kitchen folder and slid the folder into the drawer. I wrote a simple checklist on a new sticky note for my own calm. Photo, call, camera, note, return, code. I pressed it to the inside of the drawer so I would see it next time I reached for a pen. I pressed the old sticky note from the morning to the trash. The kettle clicked on the stove when I tapped its switch. At 7, my son came back with takeout and a bottle of seltzer, and we ate at the little table. He kept watching my face like you do when you don't know if a wound is clean. "You did right," I said. "You told me the truth. That is what keeps a house from breaking." He nodded and stared at the paper napkin he had folded into a narrow strip. "I'll text Manny," he said. "He needs to hear the rule too." "Good," I said. "Keep it in writing." At 8:12 p.m., my email pinged. The airline wrote back to my earlier message. The The one I sent after the first call, the one with the tag details, and a simple question about whether a retag might misplace a bag. A person in Lost and Found replied with a short note. Thanks for the information. This tag number looks consistent with our system. If you find an item that is not yours, you can bring it to our counter at Terminal 1 between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., and we will issue a return receipt. Claim Sakamur BR 44132. I printed it and slipped it into the folder. I hoped I wouldn't need it, but paper has a way of making tomorrow easy. The house went quiet after 10. No whispers slid under the door. The heater ticked the way it always ticks when it warms, then rests. I did one last check before bed. I stood in the dark kitchen and opened the garage door a crack and listened to the cement breathe. It smelled like rubber and faint dirt. No voices. I locked the door. I set the alarm. I put the kettle on with water so it would be ready in the morning. At 12:06 a.m., I woke and lay still and heard nothing but the long, soft line of the fridge. I smiled into the dark. Then a car door thumped somewhere far off on the street, and a laugh drifted, full and uncareful, nothing to do with me. I went back to sleep. Morning put new light on everything. I made tea and started a new note, not because I needed it, but because the motion settles my hands. I wrote, next steps. Under it, 3 lines. 1. Text neighborhood thread. Remind people to check addresses. 2. Put film over garage window so you can't see heater. 3. Keep code on paper in your wallet, not in your son's head. I laughed at myself gently and crossed out the last line and wrote the kinder version. Tell son the code only lives here. I took a picture of the new keypad to remind me where my fingers land now. I deleted the old code from my phone's little password list. At 9, I sent the neighborhood message with a friendly tone. Hi, folks. Quick reminder from a small mix-up yesterday. Please double-check addresses when leaving anything for a neighbor. And please don't use door codes that aren't yours. If you need a safe handoff, the airline Lost and Found is open 9 to 5. Thanks. A few hearts popped on it. One person wrote, totally had a package go 2 doors down last week. Another wrote, appreciate the nudge. At 10, I stepped into the garage for the first time since the bag had left. The rectangle where it had sat was a slightly cleaner square of floor, like when you move a chair that's been there a while. I swept the area with short, firm strokes. The broom bristles pushed a small line of grit and 2 paper clips to the drain. I found a tiny bead under the hose reel, green like a toy bracelet piece, and set it on the shelf by the paint cans in case some child comes asking. I slid a new film over the side window, the kind you spray with water and smooth with a credit card until it looks like you did a magic trick and turned the glass to milky privacy. It took 6 minutes. My hair stuck to my neck. I wrote the time on my list and drew a line through the task. At noon, I walked to 312 and knocked on Evan's front door to hand him a copy of the note for his file. He thanked me and asked if I wanted mint from his little garden. I said yes and pinched a sprig, and he watched my mouth when I said, "How are you otherwise?" The way people do when they know you know more about their day than they wanted you to. He said, "I'm a little embarrassed." And I said, "Me too. That's how we fix things." He laughed, real this time. On my way back, a woman pushing a stroller waved from the alley. It was the person from the neighborhood chat who had found the key fob last week. She said, "Everything all right?" I said, "All right now." That was the truest line available. That evening, I wrote one last email, the kind you send to yourself and file. Subject line, quiet plan. In the body, 3 sentences. Anything on my property moves only with written truth, and it moves to the right person or to Lost and Found. If someone pushes back, the one rule stands. If a whisper comes again, I take a photo, I make a note, I change a code, and I make tea. I attached the audio note transcript, a 1-line text I added under it that read, "Leave it by the heater," so I would remember the exact words that had moved through my walls and then moved away. At 8:30 p.m., the kettle clicked and my fingers found the tag on the tea bag, and I smiled at the little piece of paper tied to the string. It said, "Patience pays," which was either fortune cookie nonsense or a line the day had chosen to agree with. I rested the tag on the counter like a tiny flag on a quiet hill. When I finished washing the cup and set it in the rack, I walked to the garage and flipped the light. The white bulb lit the water heater, the coil of orange cord, the broom leaning where I always put it, the sweep of clean floor. No suitcase, no whisper, just the house, still and ordinary. The way houses are when they remember who they belong to. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt and slid the folder labeled garage suitcase into the little file box that lives in the hall closet next to the nested luggage. I pressed my palm flat against the folder for 1 second, the way you do with a child's shoulder when they pass you in a doorway and you want them to know you see them. Then I shut the closet, turned off the garage light, and let the dark fill in where it belonged. In the morning, I made a second cup of tea and looked at the little folder on the counter like it was a sleeping animal I didn't want awake. I could have slid it straight back into the closet, but I left it there while I wiped the counter and shook out the dish towel at the sink. Things that are put away too fast sometimes come back louder. I wanted to be sure the quiet was real. The house held still. Outside, a delivery truck idled at the corner. The driver hopped down, thumped a box on a hand truck, and rolled away. I watched the neighbor's curtains lift in the breeze and fall again. I opened the folder and checked the papers one more time, not to obsess, just to make sure every slip had a home. The handoff note, the airline email with the claim number, the camera stills with time circled, the printed map with my thin pen line to the airport, the sticky note checklist pressed to the inside. I slid a blank page into the back and wrote log at the top. Under it, I put yesterday's date and 4 simple lines. 10:14 a.m., driveway camera, rideshare near curb. 10:15 a.m., garage, door open, close, suitcase placed. 12:08 a.m., audio, leave it by the heater. Saved. 3:05 p.m., opened with owner consent. Returned with signed note. It looked like a little police report, but made by a person who prefers tea to sirens. I closed the folder and finally put it in the closet where it belonged. At 10, I called the non-emergency line and asked to log an incident. Not to stir trouble, just to put a number to it in case the story grew legs later. The dispatcher had a careful voice, the kind people use when they know they are the first person your words will land on. I told her I had found a suitcase in my garage that wasn't mine, that the owner had been identified and the item had been returned with a signed note, that I had camera stills and a simple summary, and that I wanted to record a quiet report so if anyone called about a suspicious bag on my block, it wouldn't bounce around. She took my name and typed. Keys tap-tapped like rain. All right, she said. I have this under miscellaneous, property found returned. The incident number is 251043 MPR. I wrote it down in my log and thanked her. No one likes paperwork until it saves you a headache you didn't know you were growing. After lunch, I walked to the hardware store for 2 things that belong more to habits than to tools. A small roll of reflective tape and a tiny brass label plate with 2 screws. The tape would go on the inside of the side door jamb, so a would-be helper would see a flash of silver when they opened it. The plate would go on the edge of the shelf where I keep the extra house keys. The words I planned to stamp into the little card were simple. Keys, Roth, note. If anyone asked me for a key, I would hand them a lined card and a pen. And I would not hand them the metal until the ink dried and the note said where, when, and why. A handoff note is just a line we both sign to show who took what. Paper doesn't scream. It holds. On my way home, I passed 312. Evan was on his porch with a laptop and a mug. He lifted his chin. All quiet, he said. All quiet, I said. You, he nodded. Changed my code. Put a little sign by the keypad that says, no deliveries in garage, porch only. It made me feel 90 years old and a little proud. I smiled. Sometimes old is just done with nonsense, I said. He laughed and looked down, the way you do when a line hits your own reflection. Maribel texted me, he said. She said she's sorry for dragging my address into her brother's mess. She also said she got a second interview at that hotel. He lifted his mug as if we were toasting something real. Good, I said. May her paperwork be short and the HR door be open when she gets there. Back at home, I put the reflective tape on the inside edge of the side door so a person would catch a flicker of their own movement if they pushed in. It's a tiny thing. It reminds the hand on the knob that hands leave marks. I stamped the little brass card and screwed the frame onto the shelf. The letters weren't straight. They were honest. I slid a blank note card behind the frame so it would be there when I needed it. Not later, not after a phone call, not after a story that takes 4 text threads to understand. At 2, my phone lit with a number I recognized from my airline email thread. "Hi, this is Andrea from ATC Lost and Found," the voice said. "I'm following up on claim BR44132. Our system shows a bag with a similar tag rerouted back to us by mistake last night. It was empty, contents likely removed by the owner, which is fine, so we're closing the loop. If you see anything else unusual related to that tag, feel free to forward, but you are all set." I thanked her. "You're the only person today who used the words all set," I said. She laughed. "We get to do that sometimes," she said, and we hung up. By 4, the afternoon had gone gold at the edges. It happens in October with no warning. The light decides the day has done enough and softens everything like a hand on a shoulder. I was slicing a lemon for tea when my son knocked again. He had a canvas shopping bag with him and the look of a person who has made a list. "I brought these," he said, and he put a little keypad cover on the counter, the kind that keeps the numbers from showing where, and a fresh set of batteries for the garage camera, and a roll of window film that looked exactly like the one I had already used. He saw it on the glass and laughed at himself. "I should have asked," he said. "But at least now we have a spare." I kissed his cheek. "Spare is a quiet word," I said. He told me he'd texted Manny. "I wrote it like a rule you put on the fridge," he said. "No codes, no exceptions, no garage. If you need to drop something for someone, you hand it to them, or you go to the airline, or you call the landlord." He slid his phone over and showed me the thread. Manny had replied with 3 lines that tamped my worry down to a little square of felt. "Got it, I'm sorry. I won't put you in that spot again." Then, "I told Luis I messed up." Then, a minute later, "He said he knows." I put my palm on the counter and nodded. "Good," I said. "When men tell other men the rules, I have time to make tea." At dinner time, the neighborhood text thread lit up with the small bright lights of a dozen people living within 2 blocks of each other. Someone said a coyote had been seen near the park at dusk. Keep cats in. Someone else asked if anyone had a spare mixing bowl. I typed a line I had been rolling, soft in my mouth, for 2 hours, and hit send. If anyone needs a neutral place for a safe handoff, keys, a document, a small item, the library front desk offers hold for pickup during business hours with ID. It's boring, and it works. A minute later, Mrs. Patel sent a heart and wrote, "Boring is a love language." I laughed out loud and set my phone down. At 9, the house was the kind of quiet you can taste. The heater clicked once and settled. The porch light hummed a small gray note by the door. I washed my face, put on hand cream, and checked that the side door was locked. The reflective tape winked at me like a cat's eye in a night alley. I smiled and went to bed. At 12:11 a.m., a whisper came again. Not the words, just the sound. A hush that wasn't the house and wasn't a car. I rolled out of bed and stood in the kitchen in the dark. My hands didn't shake. My mind didn't run. I listened. The whisper grew into the soft hiss of 2 teenagers trying to be quiet and failing. A sneaker squeaked on the cement. "Shh," one said, the way teenagers say it when they think the shh itself is silence. "This is stupid," the other said. "I told you it's the one with the crooked gate," the first voice answered. I breathed through my nose and let a beat pass. Then I clicked the light on and opened the back door. "This is the one with the woman who calls your mother," I said, and the 2 shadows froze like a photograph you take when you know the moment will be funny later. They were older than I expected. 17, 18, faces open, not cruel. A pizza box leaned on the fence post like a prop from a scene that had lost its script. "Sorry," the taller one said. "We were supposed to drop this at 3:14 and we got the gate wrong." He held up the box like a peace offering. The other held a paper bag that smelled like garlic knots and hope. I could have scolded or waved them off. Instead, I held the door open and pointed to the camera by the eaves. "Wave," I said. They waved. "Now look at the number on the pole," I said, and I pointed to the alley light where a metal tag shows the house number for deliveries. They both turned their heads. One of them read out loud, 312. The other elbowed him. "Sorry," the taller said again, honest this time. "You don't need to be sorry to me," I said. You need to be accurate to the person who paid for the pizza. They laughed, jaws unclenched. Yes, ma'am, one said, and they left. The whisper unwound into a string of footsteps, then away. I recorded a tiny line in my log. 12:11 a.m., pizza drop missgate corrected. No suitcase, no drama. I slept like a person who had closed a window that had been rattling for a week. Saturday morning brought two things to my porch: a small plate of cookies under a beeswax wrap and an envelope with my name on it. The plate came from Maribel. The envelope came from the city library. The cookies were shortbread with lime zest and a glaze so thin you could see your smile in it. The note under them read, "Thank you for being calm when I was not. MC." The envelope had two laminated cards. The library now offered a community holds program for documents and small items under £5, checked in by ID and held for 1 business day. A printed half-sheet tucked behind the cards explained the steps in 10 words. Bring item plus ID, fill card. Library prints receipt, done. It made me feel like people had heard the quiet suggestion I had typed the night before and turned it into a sign with a barcode. I put one card on my fridge and the other in my wallet behind my driver's license. After lunch, I set a chair in the garage and fixed a little draft in the vent above the water heater. I am not a plumber. The fix was one line of weather strip pressed along a seam that had lifted and a new screw turned into a hole that had let a little air sing. The new screw bit into the wood like it had been waiting for a job. The sound the vent made when the heater kicked on changed from a thin husk to a low hum. I wrote, "Vent seam sealed, 2:40 p.m. in my log, because future me would want to know why the house sounded more like itself. At 3, I got a text from a number I hadn't saved yet. "Hi, this is Luis again. I have the shoebox my sister mentioned. I would like to pick it up from my place and bring it to the library hold desk so you never have to think about it. Will you meet me there to show me how the process works?" I stared at the words, "so you never have to think about it," and felt something uncoil in my shoulders. "Yes," I wrote back. 3:45 p.m. at the front desk. Bring ID. The library smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. A kid in a red sweatshirt read at a table near the window with his mouth slightly open in concentration. At the desk, Luis stood with a shoebox the size of a pair of sandals and a nervous half-smile. He looked like a man who had aged 5 years since Tuesday and had decided to stop. Maribel was with him. The librarian, a young person with round glasses and calm hands, slid a laminated card across the counter. "Write your name and the recipient's name," they said. "Write one line about the contents. We don't need details, just the noun. Then show me your ID." Luis wrote, "From L. Cortez to Monsieur Cortez, contents, photos and letters." He held out his ID. The librarian typed. They printed a receipt with the names and the time, and they put a little sticker with a barcode on the shoebox lid. "Pick up by 5 p.m. today," they said. Maribel signed a line on the receipt. The printer chirped. Paper slid. Done. The shoebox sat behind. The desk like an item in a museum that would be returned to the person who loved it. I stood to the side and watched the transaction the way you watch a scene in a play. That could have been tragic and isn't. Luis turned to me and offered his hand. "Thank you," he said. I said a sentence into my phone on Sunday night, and then the week folded in half. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. "I get it," I said. "We all say sentences that someone else hears as instructions. From now on, when you say heater, make sure it is your heater and your garage." He nodded, the way a person nods when they don't like a truth but have decided to be friends with it. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He touched his heart with his right hand, not dramatic, just a small gesture like a period at the end of a line. On my way out, I checked the bulletin board. A flyer advertised the community hold service with 4 lines and a simple graphic of a hand placing a small box on a counter. I took a picture from my folder. I like to keep proof of ideas that become a door other people can walk through. That night, my son came by with a little envelope. "I know you said it's not about money," he said. "It isn't," I said. He nodded. "Even so," he said, "there were 2 small things I can do." He handed me 2 things, a gift card for the hardware store and a printed sheet with 4 codes in a column. "What are these?" I asked. He smiled in that sheepish way grown children do when they try to show you they've listened. "They're the next 4 garage codes," he said. "We'll change it in order on the first of each month for 4 months. I'll come over and swap it with you. We'll do it like a little ceremony. Then we'll stop telling anyone anything about any numbers." I laughed, put my hand on his cheek, and kissed his eyebrow. "Make tea first," I said. "Then we'll swap." Sunday morning was soft rain and the smell of wet pavement. I wore a sweater and tied my hair back and wrote another little plan on a sticky note. Porch sign, small. No codes, no exceptions. Deliveries, porch only. Questions? Text. I wanted it to be polite and firm, the way a good teacher writes the day's lesson. I printed it in a clean font, laminated it in my little kitchen laminator that has saved me 100 replacements of paper at the mercy of weather, and taped it to the inside of the storm door at eye level. At noon, I heard Mrs. Patel laughing over the fence with someone. I stepped into the yard with a pair of clippers and pretended the basil needed a trim. A woman stood there I didn't know, mid-40s, denim jacket, a confidence you could balance a tray on. She waved. "Hi," she said. "I think I made your week weird." I waited. She crossed to my side of the fence and lowered her voice. "I'm Manny's cousin, Alina. I asked him for a favor on Tuesday, and he asked your son, and your son did the errand, and I should have said no." I was between shifts and I thought, what's the harm in a quick drop? Then the word heater got involved, and here we are. She glanced at the sign on my porch door and nodded. "That's a good sign," she said. "I will make one. Mine will say, 'No favors via my garage.'" We both laughed. I clipped a sprig of basil and held it over the fence for her. "Smell this," I said. She did. Her face softened. "My grandmother's kitchen," she said. And for a second the week folded the other way. Back to a long table somewhere where rules were simple because people stood at the doorway and made them so. At 2, I sat with my folder and updated the log with 3 small lines. 10:23, non-emergency log created. Incident, 25-10:43 MPR. 10:24, library, community holds worked for LM shoebox. A 10:24 porch sign posted. Reflective tape plus vent seam fixed. I added a line I didn't plan to use but wrote anyway. If anything arrives by mistake again. 1. Photo. 2. Short text to owner landlord. 3. Lost and found or holds desk. 4. Change code. It felt like writing a recipe you hope you won't have to cook. The words lined up like ingredients on a counter in little glass bowls. On Monday, a small envelope came in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, careful. "To the lady with the heater," it began. I smiled. I am the one who told Luis I could do a drop. I am the friend who is sometimes not careful. I am trying to be better. Here is the promise. I will not use anyone's code again. And I will not ask a friend of a friend for a favor that belongs to a counter with a receipt. The signature was a first name only, R. I didn't need more. A promise is like a key. You can use it or you can put it in a drawer and forget it. I put the note in the folder. It wasn't a receipt exactly. It was a small line of handwriting that made a person in the story, a person you could picture in line at the library with their ID out. Tuesday, I got an email from HR at the hotel, addressed to Ms. CORTEZ CC me. It read, "Thank you for confirming your interview scheduling with the signed note. We appreciate your punctuality and documentation. Please bring your original documents listed below. Best, HR." The list was normal. ID, work eligibility, references. Below, a little PS. "We like boring and it works." I laughed and sent it to my son with no comment. He sent back a string of little emoji teacups. That afternoon, I opened my bank app for a different reason, utility autopay, and saw a small charge I didn't recognize. $4.62 for parking, city garage near the library. The date was the day Luis and Maribel brought the shoebox. My son had used my car that morning to pick up printer ink, and the auxiliary card is connected to the car's parking pass. I screenshotted it and dropped it into the folder as if the story itself were stitching another little square into the quilt. I wrote "parking receipt tied to shoebox day" under it in faint pencil, then put the pencil down. The detail didn't change anything. It made a quiet braid tighter. On Wednesday, I stood by the garage and looked at the spot by the heater and thought about what I had learned that felt bigger than codes and tags. The heater isn't a person. The heater doesn't know if it warms a room or warms a story until you assign it a job. A sentence like, "leave it by the heater," can be a perfectly normal sentence or a problem depending on who hears it and which door they open. I ran my palm along the top of the water heater, where a line of dust still lived, and made a little clean rectangle that would be dusty again tomorrow. I let that be all it needed to be. At dinner, my son said, "I keep thinking about the words truth in writing, then the bag moves." I wrote it down. I put it on the Notes app. I think I'll use it at work. He works in operations for a small shop that builds stage lights for school theaters and church sanctuaries. People ask for favors in that world like they hand you a microphone you didn't know was on. "Good," I said. "It works for cables as much as for stories." "Whose cord is this? Where is it going? Who signs?" He grinned. "You make everything sound like a kitchen," he said. "Maybe it should," I said. "Everything in the kitchen has a place. When a thing doesn't, we make one." Thursday morning, I woke early and walked. The air had that clean, empty bowl feeling it gets when the wind has swept the night and the day hasn't put anything down yet. On Maple, a moving truck idled, ramp out, 2 men lifting a sofa like a boat. A woman in a headscarf stood with a clipboard. She called, "Watch the corner," and they did. I turned at the park and passed the library. Inside, the holds desk had a new sign with a list of nouns in small type. Like a poem: wallet, keys, envelope, phone, watch, photos, letters, scarf. It made me want to add kettle just to see if anyone would smile. I took a picture and kept walking. At noon, I opened the folder again to add one more thing, a printed copy of my Quiet Plan email, the one with the 3 lines that end with T. I slid it behind the log. The folder wasn't heavy. It didn't need to be. Weight isn't the point. Order is. On Friday, my doorbell rang at 10. Maribel stood on my porch with a small bouquet of grocery store flowers in wet paper and a look like someone who had slept all the way through the night for the first time in a month. "I got the job," she said, and she didn't ask to come in. She held the flowers out like an apology and a beginning. "You don't have to," I said. She nodded. "I wanted to." She kept her voice steady. "I told my brother the rule. He told his friend the rule. We all decided to be boring. It feels like exhaling. I took the flowers." "Good," I said. "May your first day be all checklists and a short meeting." She laughed, a clean sound. She looked past me, just over my shoulder, at the heater through the little oval window in the door. "I was embarrassed that it saw me," she said. The line surprised me. I followed her gaze to the dull metal tank, the little pilot light, the pipe. "It sees all of us," I said. "It doesn't judge. It keeps us warm when we do the right thing." She nodded like I had said something about church. "Thank you," she said again. She went down the steps. Her shoes were quiet on the walk. A week passed. The log got thinner. 2 short lines about porch misdeliveries corrected. A note about the coyote moving on. A copied text from my son. Code swap day. Tea first. We did it on the 1st of the month. He brought scones. I wrote the old code on a sticky note, crossed it out, wrote the new one under it, and slid the note into the shredder. We stood in the garage and he typed the new numbers, and the keypad beeped like a tiny bird. We high-fived like people in a commercial for an easy chore. I put the scone crumbs in the compost and felt like the house had put a new tooth in. On the 2nd Friday, a man I didn't know knocked at dusk. He wore a polo with a company logo I didn't recognize, and he smelled sharply of aftershave, the kind that comes in a bottle that looks like it wants to be held in a fist. He said he was R, the friend from the note, and he had come to apologize in person. He held both hands open at his sides, fingers wide like a man who had been told once by someone patient how to look harmless. "I'm not proud," he said, "but I'm here." I did not invite him in. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. He looked at the sign on the storm door and smiled. "Clear," he said. He told me he had put 2 things in place for himself, so he wouldn't use anyone's heater as a noun in a sentence again. "1," he said, holding up a finger. "I use the library holds desk when I have to pass something that fits into a box." He lifted a second finger. 2, If it's bigger than a box, I pay for a locker service at the depot, get a code, and send the code by text, not by my mouth. He shrugged, a small, real shrug. Words have a way of getting mushy out loud, I nodded. Mushy words lead to messy rooms, I said. He laughed without having to think. Facts, he said. And he left. The folder sat quiet for days. Then one afternoon, my son dropped by with a set of glossy prints. You're going to think I'm ridiculous, he said. He had mocked up a little laminated card for his shop. Cable, tag, sign. Under it, 3 little icons. A cable with a tag, a clipboard, a check mark. I put it by the door, he said. We lost 2 extension cords last month to favors, and I'll bring it back. I'm done. I held the card and smoothed the laminate with my thumb. It's ridiculous in the way fences are ridiculous, I said. Until you remember the point? He grinned. The point is not to get fancier fences, he said. It's to keep the goats from eating the tomatoes. Exactly, I said. And we both laughed hard enough that the cat wandered in to see if we were okay. A week later, I received a small thank you card with 4 lines from the librarian with the round glasses. We've had 12 community holds in 2 weeks. No drama. People like receipts. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patel, brought us chocolate. We think you are right. Boring is a love language. I slid the card into the folder and thought about the ways small things ripple. You can throw a suitcase in a lake and the circle goes out and out. You can leave a bag by the wrong heater and create a ring you never meant to draw. You can also tape a sign to a door and put a little barcode on a box and make a ripple that is a fence. The only unquiet hour came on a Thursday when I got 3 calls in a row from unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. The first was a hang-up. The second was a woman with a tired voice asking if Luis lived there. He did not. The third was someone asking for the garage lady, which made me laugh and frown in the same breath. I called back the third number. A man answered and said he had the wrong person. A minute later, a text arrived. Sorry, we meant the other coach house. We will update our list. I wrote 1 line in the log and a second line under it that said, when the world wants to make noise, check your list. On Sunday, I organized the hall closet. I lifted the nested luggage out, wiped the shelf, and put them back in birth order, small inside medium inside large, like a family that learned to keep its own secrets, but not each other's. I labeled the shelf edge with painter's tape. Trips and the shelf below with receipts plus light bulbs. It made no sense unless you lived here. Most systems do. That evening, the neighborhood thread pinged again. Someone asked, does anyone know a simple way to record a calm boundary without being dramatic? I typed, 1 line plain. From now on, we do X by Y, if not Z. Then send a copy to yourself. A minute later, the person replied, thank you. I was about to write a novel. The thread filled with small hearts and a tiny T emoji. I wondered who started that. 3 weeks after the suitcase, I saw Maribel outside 312 in a navy blazer and black flats that had the shine of new. She was locking her door, badge swinging from a lanyard. She waved. Night audit training, she said. Numbers and keys, my favorite. Mine too, I said, and she laughed. I keep a little notebook behind the front desk now, she said. If a guest asks for a favor that belongs on paper, I ask them to write the line they want me to sign for. She lifted her chin. Half of them changed their mind mid-sentence. Paper is a mirror, I said. We don't always like our reflection, she nodded. But we can fix our hair, she said, and walked toward the bus stop, shoulders level, not rushed. A month slid by. Leaves fell, slow and sure. I did the first of the month code swap with my son. We drank tea, he typed. The keypad beeped its little bird beep. I shredded the old sticky note and watched the paper curls fold into each other like noodles. On a Wednesday near the end of the month, a brown envelope arrived from ATC Lost and Found. Inside was a small printed receipt. Claim BR 44132, closed. Return to owner with verification. Thank you for being a responsible neighbor. I didn't need the thank you. I kept the receipt anyway. It went into the folder with a little paper clip that had lost its plastic color on one loop. I pressed the clip flat. That same afternoon, I noticed one last little thing I could fix. The broom leaned in the corner by the heater with its bristles mashed and fanned, a cheap ostrich of plastic. I bought a new one with a square head and stiff black bristles. I hung it on a wall hook with a little chalk outline around the handle so a person could put it back exactly where it belonged. It wasn't about the broom. It was about the shape of the corner when you look at it and don't have to think. Thinking is for people. Corners are for hooks. One more whisper came, but it wasn't a whisper. It was the sound of my own feet padding across the kitchen at midnight to check a door lock I knew was locked. I pressed the latch anyway. It gave me that small satisfaction like the last click on a jar lid. The house breathed. It had been breathing all along. I sat at the table and opened the folder one last time to add a page to the log that wasn't a log. It was a letter to myself. "You will forget the dates," I wrote. "You will remember the shape." A suitcase appeared. A tag had a name. You took a photo. You listened. You asked a neighbor a question that made both of you less alone. You called the airline. You watched the cameras without feeling like a spy. You connected a name to a person and chose a kitchen table over a hallway argument. You opened the bag with consent. You let the paper speak. You changed a code. You drank tea. You taught your son a sentence. You learned to call the library a door. You taped a sign to glass that made your future self calmer. You wrote a rule and you kept it. You didn't humiliate anyone. You let people apologize without forcing them to bleed. The heater warmed the room. The whisper left. That's all. I signed it with my initials. I slid it behind the log, spine to spine with the world. It rained that night. A good rain. The gutter ticked and flowed. The porch light hummed. Somewhere a bus brake squealed inside. I made 2 cups of tea by accident and laughed. And then I poured the second cup into a thermos and set it by the garage door to drink tomorrow while I swept. The kettle sat cool on the stove like a coin on a palm. In the morning, I put the thermos in my pocket and swept the garage slow. The new broom made a satisfying hush over the cement. I lifted the mat and brushed under it. I found a dime and a bent paper clip and a bead that might have been the twin of the first green one, but this one was blue. I put them in a little dish on the shelf. You never know when a child will come looking for a color. I stepped back into the kitchen, turned the deadbolt, and stood for a second with my palm flat against the door. The wood was cool. The house felt like a room after a concert when the last chord has gone and the air remembers the music but keeps it inside. I flipped the garage switch. The light went out. The gray of the water heater became just gray. The orange cord a line. The corner, a corner. I labeled the folder spine with one small line, so if I ever had to find it in a hurry, I wouldn't have to think. Garage, suitcase, resolved. I slid it into the closet and let it lean against the nested luggage. Like 2 old friends who had carried weight together and now rested. I wrote my thumbnail ready line on a scrap paper and stuck it to the fridge under a magnet shaped like a kettle. The tag said a name. The truth said the rest. When I reached for milk later, I read it again, less like a title and more like a prayer. Names can be misprinted. Truth sits still. That evening, the sun slid down and put gold on the tops of the fence posts. A dog barked once 3 houses over. A child asked for a story through a wall in a voice that made me want to say yes. I set the kettle on and watched the burner bloom. The whisper didn't come. It had nothing left to do here. I turned off the garage light, pressed the deadbolt, checked the sign on the porch door, and straightened the little brass Keys Duquoir's note plate with a thumbnail. I rinsed my cup and set it on the rack and heard the last drops run down. The house was quiet. Not empty quiet. Owned quiet. The kind that lets you hear your own breath and believe it. I turned the last switch down and let the dark find its corners. The folder waited in the closet like a simple muscle. Tomorrow was clean. The heater clicked once and settled. The tag had said a name. The truth said the rest.